Hello, this is a sermon for Sunday the 29th of October 2023. That will be the 30th in Ordinary Time, Year A. The readings are Deuteronomy 34, verses 1 to 12, 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 1 to 8, and Matthew 22, verses 34 to 46. If only Hollywood had managed to get their hands on the Old Testament before it was completed, the story would have been very different. Moses, the great hero of the Israelites, has been dramatically saved from Pharaoh's death sentence against the Hebrew boys by Pharaoh's own daughter and brought up in Pharaoh's palace right under his nose. After an otherworldly encounter with God in the burning bush, he then turns against his former protectors and challenges the new Pharaoh in an escalating series of dramatic confrontations. After an Old Testament version of a Hollywood car chase, Moses has escaped by the skin of his teeth over the Red Sea. And as a crowning achievement, he has delivered God's 10 commandments to the people. Surely all that remains now is for his triumphant march across the Jordan into the promised land. Then roll the credits and everyone leaves the cinema feeling good. Didn't work out that way, did it? God missed out badly in the unconventional, unsatisfying end of the story, which sees Moses die, poignantly near enough to see the promised land stretching out before him, but unable to set foot there. It is an ending that has always puzzled everyone, including those who have added their own perspectives to the story in the development of the books of Moses over several generations. Deuteronomy is probably a late 8th century composition, traditionally thought to have been written by refugees who fled to Jerusalem after the destruction of the northern kingdom in 722 BC. Their explanation is that Moses and Aaron were being punished by God for not having resisted the demands of the distressful people at Meribah when Moses struck the rock for water. That's found in several passages throughout Deuteronomy. This version is repeated in the later post-exilic book of Numbers, in Numbers chapter 20, verses 9 to 13. In each of these accounts, the authors have some difficulty masking their sense of bewilderment at such an end for their great hero. It is as if the dying John Wayne at the Alamo, who sets light to dynamite to blow up a few more of his enemies in one final act of resistance as he falls dead, couldn't get his matches to light. A bit of an underwhelming end for such a hero. Some have taken this dissatisfying ending to Moses' life as a comment on the unfairness and precariousness of human life in general. Some Christian commentators have suggested that it is symbolic of the law itself. The law can only bring you so far, they argue. It can bring you to the cusp of the kingdom, but not entry into the promised land. That will be left to Joshua, which of course is the source of the name Jesus. Whichever of these views you take, there is no escaping the strange and slightly disappointing nature of this great hero's demise. In our passage from 1 Thessalonians, Paul is now in Moses' position, as he has been commissioned by God to bring the new dispensation to the people. Just as the Israelites of the Exodus were at times a recalcitrant lot and frequently exasperated Moses, Paul now finds a similar attitude in his day towards hearing the latest dispensation of God, the gospel of Jesus Christ. Paul recalls in his letter that he had come to them after troubles in Philippi, where he and Silas, you remember, were beaten and jailed. And they had found a similar rising opposition within the Jewish community at Thessalonica as well, as Luke records in Acts chapter 17, verses 1 to 9. Paul reminds them that his new dispensation was gentle, like a mother caring for her children, verse 7. We don't often have this view of Paul. We more frequently quote his anger in such passages as, "Oh, you foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you?" in Galatians 3:1. And we think of his many confrontations and robust argumentation. Yet here, Paul is plainly of the view that if people would just listen and give him a chance to expound the nature of the gospel, they would find it a message of gentleness, comfort, and peace. This rather reflects the occasion when Jesus referred to himself as a mother hen, seeking to gather her chicks under her wing, in Matthew 23, verse 37. By the time of Paul, the law of Moses has become an impossible burden upon the people, with its myriad of rules and regulations. Paul spent his ministry taking away that legal burden from the Jewish people and breaking the heavy yoke for good, to replace it with the lighter burden of the gospel of Jesus, who said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Matthew 11, 28 to 30. This confrontation between the nature of the new gospel and the Jewish law is the focus of our passage today from Matthew 22, verses 34 to 46. This interchange comes at the end of a series of challenges and traps set by Jesus' opponents, starting with, should we pay taxes to Caesar and all the rest of it. Now, the question doesn't look like a trap, but traps are not supposed to look like traps. That is what they rely on to work. So the Pharisees and the Sadducees come together to ask him about the law, because they know that Jesus frequently breaks the law. He heals on the Sabbath. He allows his disciples to pluck ears of grain on the Sabbath. He associates with unclean sinners, Samaritans and lepers. Perhaps they can shake the common people's confidence in Jesus by showing how little regard he has for their revered law and their national identity. Rather than deny the law has any relevance, which is probably what the Pharisees and Sadducees were hoping to hear, Jesus answers them by quoting the Shema, the daily Jewish prayer from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5. The Sadducees and the Pharisees may be quite adept at loving God, but they are clearly failing when it comes to loving their neighbour. They appear to despise anyone who doesn't measure up to their exacting standards. With their understanding of the law, they are no longer fit for purpose. God has to look to others to further his kingdom. The old leaders are set aside and new leaders are found. One disturbing implication of the death of Moses is that we too might end up fizzling out like a firework on Guy Fawkes night that has been caught in the rain. 300 years after the stirring events of John Wesley's conversion and his exciting, confrontational, transforming, and successful ministry, we are now in danger of just fizzling out. God was quite firm with Moses if it were punishment for past failure, as Numbers and Deuteronomy suggest. Now, I don't know, what do you think? Was it truly punishment for caving in to his mutinous followers, as the New Testament suggests? Or was it simply that Moses had completed the task to which God had called him, and now it was Joshua's turn to lead the people across the Jordan? It could be either. But if it is a punishment, it shows that God will not compromise his standards. If his servants let him down, he will look for new ones. If the Methodist Church does fizzle out and die in this country, in your country, wherever you happen to be, I hope it is because we have fulfilled our allotted task, and now God has handed the baton on to others who are better equipped than we are to face the challenges of the 21st century. We can face the end of our Methodist Church with peace, even if with equal sadness, if we can be sure that we have done our duty and fulfilled our calling. If we were writing an obituary for the Methodist Church, what could we say in our eulogy? We have saved Christian experience from the arid desert of Enlightenment rationalism. We released lay people to share in ministry and ecclesiastical authority before many other Christian churches. We accepted the ministry of women earlier than many. We took our faith from the chapel into the workplace and the workhouse better than many. We lifted many from poverty by amending their moral standards. And we promoted the ending of slavery sooner than many. Yet, despite many human failures and frailties, we have played a small but significant part in the story of Christ's kingdom. Perhaps we have done as much as we are equipped to do. Perhaps there are now fresh eyes and fresh legs to take the gospel into the 21st century. But I would find it very painful to discover on the day of judgment that God looked to others because he could no longer look to us. If we do fade away in this country, I hope it is not because we have lost our way and God simply cannot use us anymore. Our main contribution here in New Zealand was in the 19th century and early 20th century. I find it frustrating that we struggle so much today to make even the slightest impact upon our nation. But I know that I would rather retire than be made redundant. I would rather retire after a job well done rather than be made redundant because we are of no further use. If it is redundancy we are facing, I pray to God that even at this late hour, we may find our path again. I'm not sure how much confidence I can find in the conference that is about to start. Time and providence alone will tell.